There we go. So we're up to right now the final. This is not the last chapter, but we are up to the final shofet, the final judge in Samson. And this is really the first story of Shimshon. There actually, Chazal tells our sages to say that there are actually a couple of stories, a lot of stories that are actually not redacted in the books, but are known as Agadot. But here, this is the first. This is the first story with Shimshon, with regards to, if I can say, setting up the final act. Okay, and maybe today you won't see it, but there's a little bit of the tension that's going to start to be created. So chapter 14. I'm sorry if I'm a little bit congested, so if I'm hard to hear, for you guys to hear or to understand me, I apologize. I'm newly minted baritone, so I apologize for that.
I'm fine.
Pardon?
You sound fine.
Okay, good. I'm glad. Thank God for technology. Chapter 14. Vayered Shimshon Timnata. And Samson went down to Timnata, to Timnah city. Vayar Isha betimnata mibnot Plishtim. And there he noticed, he saw, he was attracted to a woman, and she was a Philistine woman. By the way, does Timnata ring a bell to anybody?
Timnah. No.
Timnah, yeah. Well, there's a story in a very famous story in the book of Genesis that has to do with Timnah.
Never heard.
What is it?
Never heard the word.
I bet you did. It's the story. It's the story of Judah. When Judah goes to Timnah, and there he sees what he thinks is a harlot, and end up being actually his sister, his daughter-in-law, right? Tamar, who was married to his first son as well, and his first son died. He was seen as doing bad in the eyes of God. The second son as well got married. That was used to be done. Is the second son gets married to the wife of a brother who doesn't have any children, in order to create zera, in order to create a seed, a lineage for that brother. And again, he does not. He also does bad in the eyes of God, and he's also killed. And Yehuda tells Tamar, "I have only one more son, Shelah, and he's still young." And somewhat, of course, back of his head, I can imagine that Judah is a little bit weary as well. 2 out of 3 deaths in the family from this married to a particular woman. Maybe this is not exactly safe. This is exactly maybe materials for Forensic Files. Anybody see that show, Forensic Files?
No.
Fantastic show. Anyways, so this is maybe a little bit too close for comfort. He tells her, "Go home. When Shelah is ready for you, I will send for you, and she'll marry you, and you'll be able to marry him." Anyway, time goes by. She does not marry Shelah, and she discovers that his wife passed away, and that he's coming towards her town because he had a lot of sheep, and it was time to shear the sheep. In any event, she dresses up as a harlot, and lo and behold, he approaches her. He decides to use her services, and he has nothing to pay her with. He promises to send her a goat. In the meantime, she asks for something to hold, right, for collateral, and the only thing that he gives her is his stamp, which was in those days was basically your signature. And he sends back his right hand man to give her the kid, the goat, as he promised. Of course, he can't find her, and 3 months later, it is found that Tamar is pregnant, and Yehuda orders that she be burnt because she has, she was supposed to be saved for Shelah. Only right as she's about to get burned, she picks out and she goes, "I am pregnant to whoever this stamp belongs to." And what Yehuda says is Satkami Meni, she's righteous, she's the one who's correct, I'm not. she ends up having twins, and from that is the lineage again of David. So, in
I
that,
remember that whole story, but I
Yeah.
never heard of the name Timnah.
yeah.
Right.
So
Isn't that
in
funny?
the story starts with he goes up to Timnah. Here, Shimshon goes down to Timnah. So there's a little bit of a linguistic change, and
Yeah.
some of the commentators jump on it and say that is because when even though the act of Yehuda at the beginning was inappropriate, the whole story elevated became something of a positive nature. And here you will shortly see is Shimshon's actions is downgrading him, so to speak, or how he's going to be viewed. It is also something that is negative. Is somebody's okay? So
Oh, I think we got an intruder. That
Okay, okay.
happened once before at another
Okay.
class.
All right,
Mm.
we're going to ask everybody.
Who's that iPhone down there?
Hold on one
I had
second.
this in Rabbi Shaar's class once.
You know, I'm going to ask everybody to please mute themselves, and just when you have a question, to please just. How's that? That's much better. Okay. Pasuk number 2. So after he sees Shimshon sees this young lady, maiden who he's attracted to, Vayal va'ged laviv u'limo, he returns back to his mother and to his father. Vayomer, and he says, Isha re'iti betimnata mibnot plishtim. I've been attracted. I noticed a woman from Timnata who is Philistine. Vata, please, and now, Chu otali leisha, I beg you, please go get her, arrange for me to marry her, that she should become my wife. Vayomer lo aviv ve'imo, his father and mother tell him, Ha'en bivnot achecha uvechol ami isha. Is there not amongst your brethren, amongst our nation, a woman? Because you're going to take a wife miplishtim ha'arilim, from the uncircumcised Philistines. Vayomer Shimshon el aviv, Shimshon retorts and tells his father, Otakach, no, I want that specific woman. Kihi yeshara ve'enai, for she is yeshara. Now this can be translated in a couple of ways. Here the translation is, she's the one that pleases me. Yeshara ve'enai, she's the one who I see as being straight, as seeing proper for me. She's someone who I can jive with. She's someone who's also yeshara, has morals or values. So somebody that I can connect with. And if you look here, there are a couple of steps in terms of what his father says. So ha'en bivnot achicha v'cholami is one, and one you're taking plishtim, and they are arilim. So it's he keeps on bringing the layers in terms of the reasons why his father brings the reasons why Shimshon should maybe be thinking twice about who he wants to marry. V'aviv ve'imo lo yadu. However, his father and his mother did not know this request, this entire episode is actually part of God's plan. Because this is going to be a pretext for having a case against the Philistines. Please note that in that time, Plishtim or Shlim Israel happened to be that the Philistines were ruling over Israel at that time. If you remember the first chapter, the first verse in chapter 13, I believe it is. Let's go back quickly. Here it is, 13. We see Vayosifu b'nei Israel asot hara b'nei Adonai. This is right after all of the last Abdon and all the how do you call it of the previous Shoftim. And once again, they fell into a rut. Vaitnem Adonai bi'aplishtim 40 shana. This is the pretext. Remember I told you, and this is the beginning of Samson. So they remind us that, again, the Philistines are the ones who are ruling over the Israelites at this time. Okay? So it was also mentioned beforehand. So this is a pretext. This whole thing is a setup by God. Vayeret Shimshon v'aviv ve'imo Timnata. And so Shimshon, along with his father and his mother, they go down, they travel to Timnata, they buy a ticket. Vayavo ad karmei Timnata. And they reach and come down to the vineyards of Timnah. Vehinek fir arayot shoeg l'kerto. Suddenly, a full-grown lion comes roaring and at Samson. So it's a little bit weird here, because as you'll hear as the story, his parents have no clue what this whole episode with the lions. So obviously they were not necessarily traveling together as a group. Some offer the explanation that as Shimshon was there to protect his parents, he most likely walked well in advance. They were also much older than he was, so they were not as quick as he was. He was basically clearing the way. It's interesting also to note that where does this line come from? In what area? Karmei Timnata, the vineyards of Timnah. What is Shimshon not allowed to do? One of the things that his mother was not allowed to do.
Drink wine.
Drink wine. Anything to do megefen yain, anything to do with the vine tree, from grapes, anything fermented, it was not allowed, because he's an Nazir. And so here he's reaching, and it's almost kind of like a warning, an alarm bell pushing him away. So he's attacked by a kafir. Kafir arayot, by the way, our sages tell us that lions have different names depending on what stage of life they're in. Kafir is the not quite baby, but a little bit older. This is a teenage lion. In other words, this is not an old lion that lost its luster. This is a lion that is right now just gaining his strength. So here Shimshon is confronted by this lion. What happens? Vatitzlach alav ruach Adonai. The Spirit of God grips Shimshon. Vaishasehu keshasag hagdi. And Samson rips him apart, just as one might tear a kid. In other words, a baby goat is totally vulnerable, is not aggressive, is not and if you're holding them, ever see how the pictures of people holding a kid goat in the air, kind of, it's at the mercy of whoever's holding him, and but with his bare hands, Samson rips the lion in two. Umeuma ein beyado. And Samson has nothing in his hand. In other words, he was bare. He didn't have any knife or any type of weaponry. Velo higid lavivu limo et asher asa. And he does not tell his father or his mother that which he had done. So they're not aware of this whole story with the lion. Vayered vaydaber laisha. They went down to speak to the woman. Vatiyashar beinei Shimshon, and she continued to please Samson. So now, who's Vayered vaydaber laisha? Anybody wants to give an explanation? And suddenly it says, then he went down and spoke to the woman. Who is this? Who is speaking now to the woman?
Shimshon.
Who?
Shimshon.
No.
I don't.
Who's talking? Who's talking to the woman?
Oh, God.
I thought it's the parents.
Parents, exactly. So he happens to be the father, because now they're making what was Samson's request from his father and mother?
Well,
Go
he wants
collect my
this.
bride.
Right.
To get him a wife.
Make her my bride. In other words, go make a
To
deal.
make her a wife.
Right. Go make a deal. Do what you need to do. It's not, in the old days, it wasn't just, okay, the groom gets on his knees and proposes and it's done. No, it had to be, it was a transactional affair where the parents made some kind of deal, I guess, with her parents or whoever in care she was. And that's what he asked his parents, go and make it happen. And so now, finally, they decide to go down, and now his parents are speaking to the woman, Vatishar b'nei Shimshon, and she continues to please him, even though most likely they had some kind of wheeling and dealing, and sometimes, within that wheeling and dealing, the context can sometimes make make the relationship sour, or at least not as pleasant. But in this case, it still was pleasant for Shimshon. Vayashov miamim lekachta, and after they made all of the arrangements, they actually returned back home. And a year later, Samson returns back in order to marry her. So this is, if you remember, if you know, the old ways of marriage was there were two different parts of the marriage. Now we do everything under the chuppah of betrothal and marriage. In the olden days, it used to be almost a year apart, sometimes even more. There's the engagement and then the wedding. So in this case, the engagement took place a year ago. That's what this whole ordeal was between her parents and the woman. And now, a year later, he comes down to finally to marry her. Vayasar lirot et mapelet haryeh. And as they were traveling, he actually goes off a little bit. He wants to go see where that wonder happened with the lion. And what does he see? Vehine adad dvorim bigviat ha'aryeh udvash. And within the carcass of the lion, there is a swarm of bees, and there is honey formed within the lion. So vayridehu el kapav vayelech haloch va'achol, and he scoops the honey into his hands, into his palms, and ate it along. And then he goes over to his parents and he shares some of the honey with them, and they eat. And he did not tell them, for within the skeleton of the lion is where he scooped the honey. So in other words, he's keeping this lion bit totally from his parents. Vayered avihu el haisha, and his father came down to the woman. Vayaz sham Shimshon mishteh ki ken yasu bachurim. So in those days, I guess today we have the what do they call it? The bachelor party, right? So this is kind of, in those days, it was actually the groom, before the wedding. The groom actually made a mishteh, made a big feast, and his father goes down and makes the arrangements, and Shimshon is making this beautiful feast, because that is what the young men used to do. And vayikir oto, when the people of Timnah saw him, vayikchu shloshim ereim vayu oto, and they designated 30 companions to be with him. It was also part of that ritual that he should not be alone, should be protected, should feel as part of the community. It took 30 of friends or 30 guests that they should be with him during this lavish party. Vayomer lahem Shimshon, in this party, he tells them, Achudal na lachem chida, let me throw at you a riddle. Im haget tagidu otali, if you can figure it out, Shivat yemei hamishteh umtzatem, I'll give you 7 days. 7 days. So they had a feast before the wedding, 7 days. And the father, right, Vayered avihu el haisha, he's preparing which feasts? The 7 days after. So there's going to be 14 days of feast. Does everybody get it? 7 days before was the feast of Shimshon, and afterwards, of course, we have, right? What do we have after?
Sheva Brochos.
The Sheva Brachos, exactly. So 7 days of, and that is what this father is arranging with the bride. So now Shimshon throws to his friends, those are in the party, he says, listen, I'm going to challenge you with a riddle. I'll give you 7 days. You'll have 7 days to try and figure it out. Venatati lachem, if you are able to crack it, venatati lachem shloshim sedinim ushloshim chalifot begadim. I will give 30 tunics and 30 sets of clothing if you can figure out what this riddle is. But ve'im lo tochlu lagid li, but if you do not crack this code, if you're not able to figure this out, untatem li 30 zdinim u30 chalifot bgadim, then you will give me 30 tunics and 30 sets of clothing. Vayomru lo, and they tell him, Chuda chidatcha, throw it our way. We want to hear Venishma'ina, and we want to hear it, and we're going to crack it. So we take on your challenge. Let's see what that riddle is. Vayomer lahem, and so he says to him, Meha ochel yatsa ma'achal. From the eater came food, came something to eat. Ume'az yatsa matok. And from the strong, from the powerful, something very sweet came out. And for 3 days they were troubled and they were not able to figure out this riddle. And on the 7th day, they turned around to the wife of Shimshon, and they tell her, listen, go and coax your husband, trick your husband, ve'aged lanu et hachida, and let him answer the riddle. Why? Pen yisrof otach ve'et beit avich ba'esh, for we will burn you and burn your father's household by fire. Hal yorshenu keratem lanu halo, is it in order did you invite us here to impoverish us? So they're threatening her. They're telling her, go and somehow let him spill the beans to you, and you let us know what it is. Vatef eshet Shimshon alav, and Samson's wife harassed him, and she cried to him, and Vatomer raks neteni velo havtani, you've only hated me, you've never loved me. Achidat echadta livnei ami, you have troubled my kinsmen with this riddle.
We cannot see it to the text because you're reading it below.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, now it's good. Okay.
Okay.
Sorry.
You've troubled all my kinsmen with this riddle, and you've never told me what is this riddle? What is it? I'm curious. Vayomer la, he tells her, Hine laviu limi lo higareti velach agid. I have not even told my parents. Do you think I'm going to tell you? Vatefka lav shivat hayamim, and she continues to cry and to pester him during the 7 days. Asher haya lahem mishteh, for they had the feast continues. So if you look at the numbers, it's a little strange because it starts off with the first 7 days, and now obviously it surpassed the time. So the way that the Mefarshim, the commentators answer is that it was the 7th day of Sheva Brachot. So in other words, they actually had 14 days to answer this riddle. Because not only that, because before the 7 days, she was still not his wife, right? She was betrothed to him, but not really his wife yet. It was only after they got married that she became his wife. Here they refer to him as his wife. So it must be that they actually had 14 days to try and answer. 7 days before, during the party that he threw, and then 7 days after the wedding. By the way, where does this sound familiar? Where we have this mishteh?
Feast of Esther.
Excellent, Miriam. Beautiful,
What?
right? What do we have in the book of Esther? We have all parties, right? 7 days before and 7 days after, and all this stuff. So it's there's obviously some kind of tradition in terms of these parties. Whenever it was some kind of wedding, it was a very common and a communal affair. All right. So Vatefka lav shivat hayamim, and during the rest of the 7 days of the feast, she continues to harass him, and then she cries. Vayhi bayom hashvi'i, on the 7th day, vayagedla, and he actually tells her the answer, ki hetzikathu, for she had nagged him to death. Vataged hachida livnei ama, and she goes and she spills the beans, and she explains the riddle to her people. Vayomru lo anshe ha'ir bayom hashvi'i. And on the seventh day, before the sunset, the townspeople call out to Samson. They tell him, "Ma matok midvash. What can be sweeter than honey? Ume'az me'ari. And what can be stronger or more vivacious than a lion?" So maybe that's what it is. It's for honey and lion. The Vayomer lahem, and he answers them.
Again,
"Lulech cherashtem be'eglati."
can you pick it up the text?
Yes.
Okay, now, yeah, good.
And this is a very interesting comment that Samson retorts to them, and he answers them, "Lulei charashtem be'eglati." Had you not plowed with my heifer, with my cow, lo metzatem chidati, you would not have guessed my riddle. In other words, he said, had you not played around with my wife, had you not, used her, you would not have found this riddle. Vatitzlach alav ruach Adonai. And once again, the Spirit of God gripped him. Vayered Ashkelon vayach mehem shloshim ish. He went down to Ashkelon, and there he smites 30 Philistines. Vaikach et chalitzotam, and there he takes their belongings, their clothing. Vaitena chalifot lemagidei hachida. So in other words, he punishes them by wiping out 30 of their brethren, and he takes their 30 clothings, and he gives them to the 30 people who he promised the clothing. Vayichar apo, however, he still had rage left in him. He was filled with rage. Vayal beit avihu, and he goes up and he goes back home. Vatehi eshet Shimshon lemere'ehu asher re'ahlo. And that wife that he got married to, he left behind, and she in turn became the wife of one of the wedding companions that was there. And I believe this is the end of the chapter. So this is the pretext of that, setting up the tension between Shimshon and the Philistines. It's strange, and wherever I read the commentary, is they're all like, why does it have to always be around? Shimshon goes out and he wants to marry somebody who is outside of the Jewish clan. And it's interesting how some say that he wanted to actually convert her and he wasn't able to, or he was only able to halfway, and then something goes wrong. Regardless, this is part of the plan. Somehow it's astonishing to look at this entire picture and to say, this is a shofet, this is somebody who is actually ruling over, or at least leading, or is the savior for the Israelites, while they're still doing hara b'nei Hashem, while they are sinning, and even his actions are not exactly, you would think that they're saintly, so to speak. But this is all part, and the texts are very, very clear with it. Vatitzlach alav ruach Adonai. This was all part of the plan, in terms of setting up that tension between Shimshon and the Philistines. Any question? Did anybody ever hear the story?
Not exactly.
No.
It's very cruel what you did. It's a very cruel behavior to kill brothers, to kill 30 people in order to give clothing to other 30. It actually doesn't make sense.
It's certain things. I totally agree with you. Certain things are it's not of the day. Let alone, you have to understand also in terms of the occupiers right now of what they stood for, and I guess it's almost, would make a beautiful movie in terms of the betrayal that he felt from his wife, that even after he kind of almost predicts, if you look through the words, I didn't tell my parents, am I going to tell you? And finally, in other words, he doesn't trust her, so to speak, or it's something that he's only keeping himself. Some some commentators say the reason why he did not share it with his parents is because he didn't want to come off as gloating and showing off. He didn't feel he warranted. He was still in such a young stage. He didn't quite understand the power that was actually given to him, and he was not sharing that with his parents either. In terms of, he was actually downplaying his capabilities. But with his wife, I think it was such. Think of, he goes through all that trouble, bothers his parents. His parents tell him, what are you thinking of? Go somewhere. Come on, you can do better than this. And they finally go with him, and he leaves her behind. After the first, right? It's very clear that after 7 days, he's disappointed. He goes out. He says, "Not a problem. I'll go bring you your clothing." And he does it in a very, very gruesome way, but that's part of that anger. I always see Samson, to me, I don't know, have you ever seen the character Hulk?
No.
Is Hulk a good guy or a bad guy? And if you ever see the movie, he's somebody who has, like all his power, and when he rages, he creates, even though he means well, he creates destruction. He creates always like havoc around him. He doesn't do it in a diplomatic way. The rage overtakes him, and you can see it in the size of him, and that is why he almost goes out and tries to seclude himself somewhere where he won't be tempted by anger. This is very similar to what Samson is. Samson is somebody who is incredibly powerful, and every time he's agitated or he's brought to rage, so to speak, he goes on rampage, literally. And I don't know if he turns green, but and is wearing purple shorts. But that's, to me, kind of like that character is something that I would like they say, all the superheroes reflect some kind of superpower or people that we know, personas that we know, just in a different way. And to me, Samson is really Hulk. That, I don't know if you can see it the way that I do, but he's very gentle, doesn't want to, and then suddenly he's just pushed, his buttons are pushed in a certain way, and and that's it. He no longer wants to see her. That's it. She's not my wife. He doesn't reconcile with her. He doesn't confront her and say, "What's wrong with you? How can you do this? I'm your husband." Blah, blah, blah. No, he just leaves her, says, "This is not somebody who I want to spend the rest of my life with. Maybe I made a mistake," etc. Some also say, by the way, let's go back to the answer that he retorts. Charashtem be'eglati, ometzatem chidati. You had plowed with my heifer, and you would not have guessed my riddle. Some actually say that even during the 7 days, his wife actually slept with that person who she would end up marrying at the end. And that is so he kind of maybe felt that he was being cheated on, etc., whatever it is. And that is also part of that anger, in terms of I guess brought him to kill those 30 in order to bring the clothing to them. There's actually quite a strong metaphor, if you want to look at it, in terms of the clothing of the dead. In other words, he didn't bring them. He didn't go down to clothing store or whatever it might be, and to Eaton's, and said, "Listen here, I need 30 suits," or whatever it is, and buy 30 brand new suits. No, he almost brought the clothing of the dead to those 30 people, which, from a wedding, which is supposed to represent life or beginning of growth of the community, he was actually bringing death upon them. So it's there's a little bit of a foreshadowing in terms of what kind of clothing or what is about to come to them. If you want to, it's an interesting. It could be read on many levels. I don't know if you share that with me, but I see it on a. Nothing happened just by happen chance. It was all part of God's kind of riddles, giving them a little bit of a hint of what's to come.
Why did you say God planned it in such a way? Why did God plan? Why did God want to plan it this way?
So this,
That
if you
was
look,
the God's plan.
so look at verse 19. Vatitzlach alav ruach Adonai. The Spirit of God gripped him. So in other words, and vatitzlach comes from lehatzliach, which is to succeed. This was part of the God's plan. And if you look, let's look back again.
God's plan for what? What did God plan here?
So this is exactly here. Hold on 1 second. Here we go. Okay. Look at the again number 6. Do you see it? Vatitzlach alaf ruach Adonai. Again with the lion. Again, the Spirit of God rests upon him. Okay. So in other words, whenever something bombastic happens, there is very clear that it was with the help of God. And number 4, look at that. You see, his father and his mother did not realize that his request of marrying this Philistine woman was actually that of the part of God's plans. So you will see later on the whole pretext of Samson is creating this rift or this tension between the Philistines and Samson. So in other words, he didn't just come out and just destroy them. There is this now Samson has, as we said beforehand, where is it here? I give him right to and here you see, for it's going to set up. You see, read it even in English. His father and his mother did not realize that his request was from God, who was seeking a pretext against the Philistines. So some read it as God is seeking a pretext against the Philistines. Most agree that the whole idea was that Samson is working God's plan, and Samson himself is going to have a pretext or some kind of grievance with the Philistines, and this begins the pretext. This is the first time that he is double-crossed. Who is he double-crossed by? His wife.
But can I speak for a second?
Absolutely.
It seems to me that Samson is a very strong man physically, but I'm not so sure if he's that strong in character. And it seems as though God is using him to set the Israelis and Philistines in a certain position.
That's exactly. You just said it in different words. Exactly right. It's exactly right, Esther. In other words, this is a
part of his plan.
Yes.
And also, another thing that bothered me is that when he didn't tell his parents, and he uses that to say, well, if I didn't tell them, and I would, why would I tell you? He's a little bit maybe afraid of the result that it would happen if he did tell his parents, and he's obviously not going to tell her because that's not going to be a healthy answer either. So in both cases, he's a like lose-lose situation.
Yeah.
But he's also the not the object, but the conduit between God and the Philistines.
Right. So, every hero, and I'll go back again to simplistic terms. Every superhero that we know always has some kind of kryptonite. In other words, there's always something that weakens that particular hero. So Superman has kryptonite. This guy has that one. That one has a girlfriend, Spider-Man, and so as soon as he can't really be with her, because if he does, then the villain is gonna attack her, and he doesn't want to put her in danger, and the girl has no idea why that boy doesn't want to. And in any event, there's always, every single superhero has an Achilles heel. And here, and I like to use Hulk because I think that literally about as close to it. here it's anger. As soon as something starts bubbling in him and he starts getting rage, he can't control. It's beyond his grip. And also I think it's the fact that he's also young. He hasn't matured yet. You realize how how powerful you are. He's certainly confused. I would also look at it that he's like he goes out and he rips this lion in two, and it's not like he knew that he was going to do it. He just suddenly had that that power in him. God rests his power on him, and suddenly he rips this lion in two. He almost doesn't even know how to express that. He doesn't know what happened. What is he going to go up to his dad and say, Dad, guess what? I just ripped the lion in two. He's lost for words. He doesn't quite see the entire picture. But as you rightfully said, you can see how God is playing, manipulating all the little variables in creating a certain pretext here. And that is really what is happening here. This is a setup. This is really a setup.
What is the symbolism of the honey at the after the year? And he found the skeleton filled with honey. What's that symbolism?
I'm not sure. I think you can make a lot of the way that I see it is, even though technically the lion has never been a negative symbol. If anything, in Judaism, a lion is a positive symbol. The symbol of Jerusalem is a lion. Yehuda is a lion. It's not. It's seen as a positive. Unlike, let's say, the crow. The crow is seen as a negative animal. A pig is seen as a negative animal, or negative connotation, and the lion is not. I think here the Philistines in this case is the one who's going to be the lion. They're the ones who are the strong ones. They're the ones who are roaring. They're the ones who are the king of the castle right now. And out of this, sweetness is going to come out. In other words,
The possibility that some good can come out of something bad?
No, I'm saying that they will that from all this rain, it's going to turn into something sweet. In other words, they're going to be overthrown.
Okay.
That's the way that I see it. It could be not even related. It could be just it just happened. But the idea of the lion, something that stands in front of you trying to kill you, in that case was the Philistines, in terms of they're the ones who were the tyrants then. They're the ones who had a grip hold over the Israelites. And that whole situation would turn from, exactly as he said, from the eater, it turns into something sweetness to eat. In other words, something that wants to devour you, within it grows something
Devouring it.
and it's sweet. Exactly. So
Yeah.
I think that is, to me, the analogy.
Yosi,
Yes, Parla.
I'm wondering, why is Samson supposed to be from Jewish heritage?
Yes.
So
Absolutely.
why is he taking a wife from the Philistines?
So that's exactly what
Asking for one.
So that's exactly what his father and mother are trying to dissuade him from doing. But this is all part, as we see in verse 4, this is all part of God's plan. So this is all was supposed to be. And the reason why is, I'm going to show you here. This is the key, okay? This is the key. Right there. And this is it. That's what it is. That's the key. We're setting up because God was seeking a
Us from
pretext
God.
against the Philistines. In other words, this is a setup to create a reason why you have a ta'ana, you have a grievance against them. But that is exactly the answer is right there.
Why did he kill the men from Ashkelon? Like, what's special about that city?
I think it might have been just a city that was next to it. Maybe it was a sister city. I didn't really look at the map. Maybe it was a city. Ashkelon was the port city, so certainly in the olden days it was an important site where most likely the Philistines took care of all the, or took over all the finances and the how do you say, the control of the money in terms of, or the goods coming in from the port or going out from the port. It's part of their control. And part of that whole idea of you got the riddle, I'm going to give you back your suits. Your suits ain't going to be some virgin
spoke to
wool,
them on the
whatever.
phone.
I'm going to give you
It spoke
somebody
too
else's
easy when I
clothing.
give you.
And
No, you guys be
he goes out there and brings them 30 clothing, but 30 other ones. He does to those 30 people in Ashkelon what he really wants to do to those 30 people in Timnata.
Because it
wrong
was
place at the
next
wrong
door.
time.
It was not
Understand?
far to go, I assume. It's
That to me is the way that I see it in terms of he goes out, brings the suits, and what he really wants to do, that rage that he really wants to show towards those 30 that pretended like, oh, they figured it out, and how, oh, what's sweeter than honey? Oh, baby, oh, honey, yeah. Make him look like an idiot. He goes, that is almost, he does to the 30 in Ashkelon that which he really wants to do, and they are clothed in clothing of the dead. You know what I mean? Like, in other words, they're so happy to receive, in those days, clothing, shoes, just the bare necessities. And not like today, we have 15 pair of shoes or whatever, how many pairs of shoes we have of different color and different, like for walking, for jogging, for this, for night, or for Shabbat. In those days, you had maybe two. So to have a whole set of new clothing is winning the jackpot. So for him, they're wearing the idea of wearing also, like they're so happy to be receiving it. They had no idea where he got it from, from where. So it's
Got that, but the men from Ashkelon, like it seems like they're innocent.
they're all very innocent, they're just neighbors. They
right.
got somewhere close by. You
right.
took innocent people, that's why it's so gruesome.
Yes.
But I assume that it was next door. You didn't have to go far. You figure out the first people you meet there, he will rob them, kill them, and rob them. So
Right.
I
They
assume
were
that,
in the wrong place at the wrong time.
right.
It's
And what is the place that name? The towns that we're talking about? Tamim,
Timnata.
yeah, Timna. Most probably Timna and Ashkelon next to each other. That's
Right. They're certainly very, very close to each other.
all. Yeah, they didn't want to go far.
The idea is here. I also think the way that the wife kind of now she shows almost favoritism to the city. In other words, rather than taking her husband's side, she double crosses him for her brethren, or for her, and he, like I said, this is out of the rage. You want to talk about brethren? Not a problem. Here, I'm gonna give you. And he goes out, but he goes out and kills 30 Philistines. So in their state, so to speak, in terms of like as a punishment for cheating, kind of double crossing him, or not showing how do you call it, loyalty. You know what I mean? In there, it's hard for us to use our mores and our norms today, because this does not happen today. You know what I mean? This the same way that it's very hard for us, to conceptualize how does one guy rip a lion in half, let alone, I'm grossitated by watching if my dentist has a video and to show me how he does a root canal, I'm about to throw up, let alone rip an animal in two. Here you have it's a very different, very gruesome, very barbaric in a way, but it's almost midah keneged midah, and a measure for measure in terms of his. But I think, again, beyond dissecting it, how gruesome or that, I think the idea of as a person, Shimshon is somebody filled with incredible ability, incredible strength. He doesn't know how to harness it. And this is where, and you can almost tell like he's the character is still very, very young and very, very immature, for sure. And he works and he works on whim. You know how he feels, woof, and he's a Hulkinator. It's exactly what the Hulk is. You know, like he's uncontrollable. He's the nicest guy, and as soon as you introduce that little rage in him, and that's a total different person, and he can't control, and he's going around and he's just like total chaos around him, and that is actually maybe the lion, and the sweetness is also could be seen as Samson himself. He's a lion. Inside of it, but he's also, like he's us. He's strong. He's uncontrollable. And he's anyways. It's a very interesting case study that you can make. Any other questions by?
I think I may have missed it, Yosi, but what is, I had to step out. What is behind this strange riddle? Why this riddle? What was the purpose? I must have missed it.
The riddle was that he was confronted by a lion, and he ripped the lion in half. And then a year later, upon returning back to that same site, he noticed that there were bees, a swarm of bees that lived within the carcass of the lion, and there was honey there. So and he ate from the honey. So he used that experience trying to see if they can figure out what that is. Now, for me as a riddle, I don't know, if I told you, what is blue and green, and you have no idea what I did, last week, wherever I was, in IGA, and I looked at a box of cereal, why would you know that? I don't know. But I guess in those days, the whole idea was that it was out in the open. He killed the lion. It's not like he killed it, somewhere. It's within someone's vineyard, and presumably they went out and harvested the wine or harvested the grapes, etc. Would have come along and seen a carcass of a lion and ripped in half. I mean, this is not like every day happens, right? This is not a sight that you would forget, if you see it. And nobody apparently even noticed it. So it's that to me also is a little bit kind of funny and shocking. But that's where it is, Stephen.
Okay.
Any other comments?
No, I think we did it justice.
Beautiful. So we're going to continue, God willing, next week with chapter 15. And there's there are only a couple of chapters left for the book of Judges. And I want to take this opportunity, by the way, to wish everybody a Chag Shavuot Sameach and joy. And from that sweetness, by the way, I don't know, the part of Shavuot is having dairy, specifically no meat, so no killing it, and that was one of the preparations in terms of going vegan or going vegetarian before Matan Torah, because even though we are allowed to eat meat is seen as something that is, you take a life in order for you to sustain yourself, and some perhaps there's no need to. And but I want to wish everybody a really Chag Sameach, and I look forward to continuing the chapters with you next week, everyone.
On
Chag
29.
Sameach.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yosi.
Thank you.
Chag
Thank
Sameach.
you.